Great, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the May 17th Paratransit Coordinating Committee. Let's go ahead and get started with introductions. I will just go ahead and call on folks, and if they could then just say hello and introduce themselves. Maybe if there's anyone new, just give us a brief sentence about who you are and your interest in the committee. That'd be great. So I'll go ahead and start on the phone. We have our chair, Dennis Battenberg. Dennis, do you want to say hello and test the sound?
Yeah. Hi. Great,
thank you. And then I see another person calling in from a 235-6433 number. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? All right, maybe we'll come back and try the phone folks again. All right, let's go ahead and go to, oh, I do hear an echo. So sorry. Let me just go ahead and mute this phone for a moment. All right, let's go to SCTA staff. I'm Dana Teray. I'll pass it to Ross.
Ross Clendenin, Marketing and Communications, SCTA RCPA.
Great, and Drew.
Hi, Andrew Nichols, SCTA RCPA.
Thanks. Let's go to Kathleen.
Kathleen Cortez, I'm with the Area Agency on Aging.
Thanks. And Maria.
Maria Arce, Transit Specialist with Sonoma County Transit.
And Tracy.
I am Tracy Beards. I'm on the Area Agency on Aging Advisory Council, and I'm attending as a member of the public.
Thank you. And Emily.
Hi, I'm new this month. Emily Heinzman with Russian River Senior Center in West County Community Services, and I'm the director out there.
And Colin.
Hey everyone, it's Colin Toma. I am a new member, and I'm the Citizen Change Advocate with Disability Services and Legal Center.
Thank you. Welcome.
And we're in San Jose. Thank you.
Thank you. And John?
John Gaffney, ADA Compliance and Program Manager for the Golden Gate Bridge Highway and Transportation District.
And Yuri?
Yes, I'm Yuri Kozin with Santa Rosa City Bus, transit planner. Thank you.
Thanks. And Carol? Carol just went off video, so maybe she could introduce herself later. Mohammed.
Yes, Mohammed Ali from MV Transportation, and we are running the Paratransit for the Santa Rosa City. Thank you.
Thank you. And let's go back to the phone. If the person whose phone number is ending in 6433 could introduce himself. All right. And just as a reminder to mute and unmute yourself on the phone, you could go ahead and press *6. All right, let's move on to public comment. Or is there any comment from the public?
Can you hear me now?
Oh, hi, now I could hear you.
Hi. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, it's me, Arturo Gonzaga with Becoming Independent. I was going to say hi, everybody.
Hi. Sorry, I didn't catch your name. Could you repeat that?
Arturo.
Oh, Arturo. Okay, great. Thank you. Excellent. All right. Is there any public comment?
Hi, Dana. This is Sylvia with Petaluma Transit. I don't think I got to introduce.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Sylvia.
All right.
Thanks for jumping in. All right, not hearing any public comment. Let's move on to approval of the meeting notes from the March 15th meeting. Does anyone have any comments or corrections? All right, so hearing none. Can I get a motion on those notes?
Make a motion.
Thank you. All right, we'll take that as accepted. And I will, hold on one moment. I'm gonna fix my phone on the other side of the room that I'm looping Dennis into.
In the meantime, if I may ask for a second on that motion for the notes for the record, please.
I can second that.
Thank you, Kathleen.
All right, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the SCTA Citizens Advisory Committee appointment of a representative from TPCC. So TPCC has a position on the Citizens Advisory Committee, which is another advisory committee under SCTA. And our previous member is no longer on this committee, so we do need to appoint a new member representing the TPCC. The Citizens Advisory Committee is its primary function is to review projects and policies, as well as funding programs and other items that may be acted on by the SCTA board. And they are also particularly tasked with being an independent oversight committee of our sales tax measure called Measure M. So the committee is held on the last Monday of every month at 4 o'clock. And we are looking to fill this position. Jenna Erickson, who's the vice chair of the TPCC committee, has expressed interest in this appointment. I don't see her on the call today, but I told her that I would make sure that everyone knows that she is interested. So at this time, I would just like to ask if there are any other nominations or questions about this appointment.
I'm on that committee already, and I just thought that since I'm one of the newest members on that committee, and many of the standing members have been on there for it seems like years, even decades, that there should be some type of onboarding for that committee, because it is very highly technical, and the agenda packets that come out are very technical as well, and often there's not a lot of time to review those before the meeting. So my suggestion would be, especially, being a disability advocate, is having some kind of onboarding about what the committee is and does, and the expectation of that.
Thank you, Kathleen. That's very good feedback. And I think that's something we should definitely be able to do. We have some written documentation about the committee, and could probably work with somebody one-on-one as well. Right. Are there any other questions about this appointment? I'll also just mention that the committee is a public, they are public meetings, and so anybody's welcome to attend. But we do want to fill this position as a voting member of the committee. All right, I'm not hearing any other questions. Would anybody like to make any other nominations, or I'll just ask now for any other nominations. All right. Well, then I guess I will ask for a motion. If somebody would like to make a motion to appoint Jenna Erickson, who is the sole nominee at this moment.
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Yuri. And is there a second?
Dana, if I'm able to second, I'll second.
Thank you, John. All right.
And Dana, just for everybody's sake, is there, can anyone on this call or who is there, can make motions and seconds, or is it limited just to certain people?
Any member, so the transit, any members of the TPCC can make motions and vote on any action items. The transit agencies are members and can vote. All right, well then, any objections? Great, then that passes, and we'll move along to the next agenda item. All right, so item number 5 on the agenda is the MTC Coordinated Plan Survey. I distributed this survey earlier on to this group, and you may have received it if you're on any of MTC's lists. MTC came to a meeting, I believe, in January and talked about the coordinated plan. This is a plan that they update every 4 years or so. And so they are doing some public engagement right now and asking for input, especially from seniors, people living with disabilities, and people in or representing low-income communities. There's a link right in the agenda packet to the survey, and there's also on page 6 of the agenda packet, there's a flyer with links in multiple languages in there. So the survey does close on May 20th. So if you are somebody that is informed on taking the survey or able to distribute it to your members, that would be very much appreciated. And this was just should have been an information item, but I'll just open it up if anybody does have any questions on this. Yeah, all right, then let's go ahead and move on. Item number 6 on the agenda is really just a save the date. MTC, as along with other paratransit coordinating councils throughout the Bay Area, are putting together a conference on June 9th. I also sent out a save the date to this group. And so I just wanted to include it in this agenda and make sure that everyone on the meeting is aware. June 9th from 10:30 to 2 p.m. There will be a virtual conference. So a chance to speak with other paratransit coordinating councils throughout the Bay Area and talk about a few kind of important topics that for paratransit coordinating councils. They'll be talking about membership, kind of how to develop and retain membership on PCCs, as well as some actions that came out of the Bay Area Transit Transformation Action Plan that was developed through MTC that specifically relate to accessibility, including transit services for older adults, people with disabilities, and people with lower income. So it should be an interesting meeting. It'd be great if folks here who are interested are able to attend. I will definitely be there and will report out to this group at our next meeting. So if you, let's see, I will, when there's an update to that with actual Zoom information, I'll go ahead and send that out again. But if you've accepted the save the date that I sent around, that Zoom information should be updated when it's available.
Well, this will be similar to past years where they did the regional TPCC.
Yes, I believe so, although it will be virtual.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, those were useful.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that the last one was several years ago. So
right.
It'll be good to have one again.
Do you know if they'll be recording it at all?
You know, I don't know. I can try to find out.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Next on the agenda, item number 7 is the transit integration update. I've added this and as just kind of to have a regular update on the effort that SCTA is working on with the Santa Rosa City Bus, Sonoma County Transit, and Petaluma Transit. And just wanted to, you know, make this a standing item, provide some information as we move along. We have been moving through some phase 1 items, tasks such as developing the Paratransit 1-seat ride pilot, taking a closer look at synchronizing transit schedules and change dates, as well as fares and some customer service streamlining items. So as those have been moving along, we have been preparing to move into phase 2 of the integration effort, which will be funded starting at the beginning of the next fiscal year. So right now we're working on getting a project manager to lead that effort, and hope to have someone in place when the funding becomes available at the start of the next fiscal year. So we will continue updating this committee as we move along through that process. Essentially, we're expecting about an 18-month process, which will prepare the 3 transit agencies for our more unified branding and marketing, as well as information and customer service. Are there any questions or additions on that from the transit operators? Yep. All right. Well, let's move along to roundtable updates. And let's start with Golden Gate Transit.
Hi, thank you. Not a lot to report right now. We have a new paratransit contractor we have since February. Still trying to work all the kinks out there. So thank you for your patience. We are trying to progress forward, even though we've been at a loss for a GM for a couple of months there. So that looks to be clearing up in the near future, and we're happy about that. Ridership on the fixed route is still about 30% of what it was prior to the pandemic, and on the ferry is also about 30% of what it was prior to the pandemic. Bridge traffic is also down. It's about 80% of what was pre-pandemic, but most of that, not most of it, but a significant portion of the increase is on the weekends. We're still seeing very low numbers Monday through Friday. Yeah, I think that's all I have.
Thank you, John, and thanks for your message in the chat. John checked with Drennan at MTC, and the regional PCC meeting will be recorded. All right, let's move along to Santa Rosa City Bus.
Thanks, Dana. Yeah, we are, I think the biggest success lately is we've had the unlimited youth ridership program going since July, and so we're in the midst of trying to get feedback on that program through surveys, and just working to ensure that that continues. Yeah, ridership is still down on fixed route and paratransit, but you know, we're seeing some good ridership all around. We hope to make some further changes before students come back in the fall, but we'll be on the current schedule as is till then. We've been actually dealing with some issues around having enough drivers, so we've had to in the last few weeks cancel certain trips, and we've had some, just posting that on the website and sharing that just due to lack of staff. So if we can clear that hurdle, that's when we can start putting more service out in the street. The one-seat rides with the Sonoma County are going well. We continue to see more people using the service to get using city bus specifically or not city bus, but city paratransit to get from town up to Sutter and the kind of airport area, because now we provide just a one-seat ride up to there for Santa Rosa registered riders, and so that goes so up to Airport Road, as far as like downtown Sebastopol, as far south as like the casino area, and as far east as Oakmont. We're working on electrification planning for our, we expect to have 4 buses in service by December of this year. So there's a whole bunch of details along with that. Yeah, I think that's a small update. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Yuri. All right, Sylvia, would you like to give an update on Petaluma Transit?
Yeah, so for Petaluma Transit, we're still continuing to limit a little bit of the space on the paratransit vehicles. We have seen an increase on ridership. We are still continuing, and we'll continue to do paper applications, and we're working with the other agencies in the region to have a standardized application, as well as so for new and recertifications, as well as an auto renewal form. So we will keep the public posted on when those become available. And we'd like to thank Maria for, making that happen. So she's been the big push on this. And we're continuing to work to try to improve our service. Right now, we are very short on bus drivers. So if anybody knows of anybody who's looking and interested in driving for Petaluma Transit, the great thing about our agency is that we're local. All of our routes and our drivers are stay within the city, so there's no long hauls. It's all here, and they are very much a little tight little family here. So that is the work culture we offer. And as far as paratransit drivers, we're also looking for paratransit drivers. So please send anyone our way if anyone's interested. Other than that, we don't really have too many other updates.
All right, thanks, Sylvia. All right, and I don't see anyone from, oh, sorry, Maria. Would you like to give an update on Sonoma County Transit?
Sure, no problem. Not much to update here. Basically, that I was asked about masks. We are, masks are not required. Just, as a reminder, they remain optional. That BART is the only agency right now in the Bay Area who's requiring masks. In terms of ridership, we're at 50% of pre-COVID levels. We have been increasing, but it's a slow pace for sure, but it's good to see the increase as we go forward. Other than that, don't have much more to update.
All right, thank you. All right, let's move on to mobility partners. Kathleen, would you like to start off?
Sure. So we are winding down our 5310 grant this year. So we will be losing, unfortunately, some of our services. So that won't be so great for some of our older adults and people with disabilities. So the grant ends October 31st is the end of our contracts. And other than that, we're seeing a increase in COVID cases. So just overall county-wide cases are up. So people are being asked to do more telecommuting, and our meetings are still all on Zoom. And I don't really have anything else.
All right, thanks, Kathleen. Arturo, if you I think that becoming independent is technically a mobility partner. If you have anything that you wanted to update the group on, go ahead.
Well, there's not that many updates from the last session I was present. We are still also looking for drivers, and are still opening for a new building is still got pushed to the end of August. But also we have noticed that there's also more COVID cases, so sometimes the ridership is down. Right now it's down for a little bit. Other than that, there's not much updates. Just like everybody else, we're hurting for workers, and hopefully that changes. We got a couple of prospects coming in, and hopefully they work out so we can alleviate our staff and hopefully get more routes in the future.
All right, thank you. All right, I think that brings us to other business comments and announcements. I do have one that I should have given at the beginning, but I'll give it now. So some of you may remember Stan Gao, who was a member of this committee for many years and served as vice chair for quite a long time as well. I heard that he passed away last week, so I just wanted to take a moment of silence and to remember Stan. Thank you. And if anybody else has any other announcements or comments.
Just add, Dana, I remember when you and I took that trip to the TPCC with Stan a number of years ago, and yeah, I saw him like on Earth Day. He was just like jetting across Courthouse Square, and I saw him briefly. I don't know if I know you were out there that day. I don't know if you got to see him. But,
no, I didn't.
But I kind of had to flag him down. He was on his way. Probably, I think he was on his way to catch a bus. But yeah, that news hit pretty hard. And he was very active in a lot of groups in Santa Rosa, and just really valuable to have as part of discussions and just yeah, he'll be very much missed.
Yes, he will.
I have a question on another subject, and that was a good discussion. I don't know if you guys want to still talk about Stan, but my question is, as a member of the public, if we're looking like the advisory council for the AAA to be advocating for improved paratransit services, the system is so confusing that it's really hard to figure out where the handles are or where the levers are. Who do we talk to? Where can advocacy be done when people that we have these within 3/4 of a mile of a fixed route? We need more services than that. How do we advocate for that? Who do we talk to?
Well, I think that this group is a good place to start, since we do have representatives of all the agencies that run paratransit. So absolutely bring your questions and your comments, and Maria and Yuri and Sylvia and John can all help to provide a better understanding, and I'll just open it up if any of them have anything to add.
Yuri, you want to start?
Well, sure. I'll just say, you know, we have City Bus has a paratransit user group, which, you know, there's individuals that just ride City Bus that come there, and but I would agree with Dana that this is the forum to really bring those, you know, especially if multi-system concerns together, because we all operate under the same federal guidelines, and I'm very curious as to what some of your feedback is and where you'd like to go with it.
I just want to echo what Yuri has to say. I think that, you know, we are kind of governed, not kind of, but governed by these federal guidelines. And so then, but I feel you, because it gets so tricky when we're trying to help people and we say, oh gosh, these are the guidelines we're working under, and you just want to give them a ride. So I definitely, I love that people can bring this information to the forefront and see if some change can happen. You know, funding is based on these, you know, these rules, these 3/4 of a mile boundaries. Mm-hmm. So we don't have, you know, and I don't want to speak out of turn in terms of representing all the agencies, but that becomes an issue in terms of what are we offering. So I often try to, you know, do my best. I'm new here, but even in my past agency, to work with groups such as these and find, you know, where can we fill in the holes where we're missing, and then and I think this area especially is doing really well to look at how can we streamline at least the process so that people aren't getting kind of shoved all around. And but I think the more we know and the more we hear, the more we can be transparent about what binds us, as well as what we can offer. And it keeps that conversation flowing.
Understanding is that 3/4 of a mile is a minimum. Is that right? Correct? Like the paratransit providers could go outside of that area if they wanted to.
If they wanted to, and if funding is available. Often mm-hmm. You'll find we have to meet the minimum first, because that's what we're federally required to do. For instance, on our service, every ride someone takes probably costs about $130. So I have to meet that minimum requirement first before I can even talk about going beyond it.
And I wonder with the transit integration, if has been any discussion or thought about on-demand paratransit or expansion of paratransit services. Has that come up at all?
When you say on demand, can I just ask for a little more information about what you mean by that?
Well, you know how you have pre-scheduled requirements that they have to pre-schedule a ride. So this would be that somebody could call up and, you know, like a normal an able-bodied person could get an Uber, where a disabled person cannot get one always. So it would be kind of like that, like they could call up and get a ride without having to pre-schedule for several days.
I mean, I'll speak for City Bus. You know, if we have availability of the day of, we do offer, you know, we will allow for that fill in. But I think it's definitely a resource question. Like we want to, you know, we would love to provide rides for everybody, as more people, wider slot, but we only have so many drivers, and so making sure that we're providing trips to those that are, you know, within like John said, like within the required area, and making sure that those services are really prolific are number one. But I mean, even if to talk about, you know, some other areas, what they've done is, you know, with new funding and, you know, trying to have people that don't have a mobility device to be able to use some of the, you know, the TNC type services, so that then you have more availability on your paratransit vehicles. I mean, some of those strategies are we've seen used, and I think we're open to. I think the funding is the question, being able to bring more funding in for those type of new programs. And I know the Blue Ribbon Task Force is going to have a call for some projects coming up here this fall. So this is probably timely for us to, if there are some new type of programs that we want to coalesce around, I think there'll be some pilot type funding available. And then in terms of the integration work that we're doing, we're really trying to integrate our existing services. So not necessarily expanding services. We're trying to kind of make sure that the existing services are all basically the same as possible. I mean, and I think currently, the 1-seat rides is kind of like a beyond, it's like, so, but there are things that just like end up making sense. Like the 1-seat rides really make sense because I don't think we're seeing at this point, and Mohammed and Maria, correct me if I'm wrong, and Sylvia, but I don't think we're not necessarily at this point, paratransit services are kind of, there's not as many requests as there was pre-pandemic. So we kind of have some availability, but our concern with the kind of the 1-seat rides is that as people ride more and more, and we have to go kind of farther distances, are we going to be able to sustain that 1-seat ride because it takes more vehicle time? Because for city bus, for instance, we don't have to provide a service that goes up to the airport, but it makes sense in terms of efficiencies, and that is something I've had curiosity about is there a way that we can schedule trips, using our vehicles and find more efficiencies and using some sort of different scheduling platform. But I think this is a good place to continue those conversations.
One of our questions has been around the Measure M funded projects that older people and people with disabilities were listed as primary beneficiaries for Measure M when people voted for it. But then when we look at what projects are being funded, we don't see projects for those populations. And when we come to meetings, it seems like all the decisions have already been made. So who gets those projects into the Measure M pipeline? How can we get our populations represented for Measure M dollars?
So I can speak a bit to Measure M. The expenditure plan for Measure M was approved when the measure was approved. So that was 16-ish years ago. And so there really, how that funding, the projects that funding was for are set in stone. The measure does provide that 10% of the measure does go to transit, and does help sustain the bus transit that is out there right now. And that includes paratransit as well. There are, Measure M sunsets in 2025, and is then going to be replaced by the Go-Sonoma Act. And there are formulas that are set and have been adopted. However, the actual expenditure plan was not adopted there is an expenditure plan adopted with that, but it's different in that it sets percentages for different programs. Specific projects have not been adopted for that program. So there is certainly opportunity to weigh in for future projects through the Go-Sonoma Act.
So how would that happen?
That's something that we have not, it hasn't started yet, kind of adopting those projects. So it would be through SCTA, and those projects will go to our board. we're not there yet because it doesn't go into effect until 2025. But I do anticipate, some discussion coming through this committee and definitely through our board as we get closer to the time when that funding comes in. In terms of the funding that does go to transit, that's for all services that the bus transit operators do provide. And so, that would be including paratransit service.
So if paratransit users are having unmet needs, who should they be talking to about that? Their supervisor, county supervisor?
I think that it probably depends on if the need is due to a lack of funding to extend services, which I'm imagining that's generally where the need is, right? And, the funding for transit is very limited and generally comes from state and federal sources. There's not a lot of local funding that goes directly to transit. So that,
other communities are obviously doing better than we are. How can we be more like them?
I think a lot of it is these kind of meetings and having more outreach opportunities. Again, I'm new in this area, but I think I've relocated from another area, but where I've seen, excels, like as we have these conversations, so we can, you get this information, we can bring it in front, understand what the primary concerns are, and then make sure that there's an awareness about what our limitations are. And then as you're asking, well, where do we go next? Okay, if this is a federal ruling, then who should we talk to? Because it doesn't make any sense for your energy to be spent on things that won't yield. And so I think that is exactly why Dana and we're kind of saying, like, tell us, because I think then as we take it in and we can say, okay, well, here's our parameters of what we can do. Here's what we can't do, and here's why.
Yeah.
Then say, okay, use your advocacy skills and get the people there and put the attention there. And I think that's what you're asking for. And so I would agree that this is a phenomenal space for it, because as we hear, like, okay, what is the purpose? And it's not to say that it dead ends with us. I think what happens is we go back, because we have a lot of meetings, and say, oh, we're hearing this more and more and more. What can we do? And then report back, like, we can't do this, and here's why. And then allow that process to happen. But please, my other transit agencies, sure if I'm misspeaking, for sure.
That's helpful, thanks.
No, I agree with Maria and Dana. It's not like we are in the business of denying services to people. I think it's the opposite. It always comes down to resources, though, and it's always trying to figure out how to best utilize limited resources for the most amount of people. And so that's why, we don't always know what we don't know. And that's why it's important to have these sessions where the public can voice their needs, and then we take that back. And we don't always get to make the final decision on how funding gets allocated to different services, but we can at least report back. And the more we hear about it, the more we report and the more we request. But, it always comes back to the advocacy groups in the communities to, request and push, right? Push for those needs. So yes, absolutely. This is a space, as well as other public meetings that involve transit, to have people show up and advocate and be those voices of support. When we, as transit agencies, then have to go and request money, we have groups that will then sign off on petitions and, grant letters and stuff like that. So it's important that people still attend.
Great.
I would just say, that Go Sonoma money is definitely a place for you guys. we say we don't get much local funding, but I know from living in or working in other states that that's more than we ever got in those other states. So, you know, it's not much, and it definitely funds some critical programs that we already have. And you get this push and pull between fixed route and paratransit, and you know, and you're trying to serve the most members of the public, and it's a lot. You know, we're all kind of trying to get work, playing with fewer resources than the percentage that the roads get in the Go Sonoma. But it's so yeah, staying involved in that process. And when I'll say, I'll just stick my neck out here and say, when we compared the Go Sonoma percentages compared to the Marin initiative, transit got a lot less percentage than, that includes paratransit, got a lot less percentage than what they did in that initiative. So I think staying involved in that local process, even though some of that ship's already sailed, and there'll be another iteration years down the road, and then and just getting creative. But yeah, we're happy to share what we know in this space.
Thank you, Tracy. Does anybody have any other comments or announcements?
I guess I'm curious, is there any specific concerns, Tracy, that you were hearing about?
It's Cloverdale who's making the most noise in our world right now. But really, I'm thinking that 3/4 mile limit, or minimum that you're doing, which I totally understand, but that doesn't work for a lot of people. So that's the kind of stories that we hear, is people that need help from their house.
And some of the solutions that because once you start really making that 3/4 mile get bigger, it's like it might not work for everywhere. It might be there, because there's also kind of there's also the there's people that live where they do now, right? But at the same point, if you extend the 3/4 mile, or extend 3/4 mile everywhere, then you give this false impression that we can, people can move to anywhere and we're going to be able to serve them, and then our resources get strained. So, so there may be there might be a solution where there's certain regulations that suggest in the ADA where you can't, if you have an area that's circled by paratransit and then you have a hole in the middle, like that's not really a best practice, but there's also areas, so there might be a combination of solutions that might work. There's some sort of individual trips for individual people. It's there, so there might be a creative solution. Sometimes the kind of just the expanding 3/4 mile may make the problem bigger.
And so there might be different parts of this web that need to come together, but I don't know who oversees that planning, who sees the big picture and sees where the holes are.
Just add that one of the reasons what we kind of are sounding the alarm is all the data for the state of California and the county of Sonoma is, our people are aging. We are, with the cost of living, we're not keeping younger people, but we're maintaining all our older adults. And with the cost of living and housing in the urban areas, it's pushing people further out. So all the rural areas, West County, the coastal communities, there's no service for those people that are aging in place in their homes. Perhaps a dial-a-ride service or something where people can have access, because we just see the population, the census data is trending up and services are trending down. So that's all.
And like Kathleen said, that there's the 5310 grant that's ending that the county's been doing, that people aren't ready for some services to just drop off like that. So we're going to run into some problems here. Emily, can you tell us how it's going to affect you guys?
Yeah, so right now we have a paid driver and a full-time mobility manager. We're doing about 200 to 250 rides a month for seniors and people with disabilities. And yeah, when our contract ends on October 31st, people will be scrambling for sure. We're hoping to work with Sebastopol Senior Center on their volunteer driver program, but you know, if gas is $6 a gallon and people have to take someone into Kaiser and back, yeah, so that's going to be a huge loss for sure. And the 3/4 of a mile out on the river is like, I mean, y'all have been out on the river, right? And you're going in the canyons and up those hills. People with disabilities and seniors can't necessarily walk that. I mean, it's a hike. So yeah, so I feel your pain.
So we need
for what so exactly what are the services that are being lost with the loss of that funding? It's the volunteer driver programs.
West County, as Emily was saying, they were operating a rural program where they had a shuttle. So they have a wheelchair accessible vehicle that they schedule trips, shopping trips and medical trips for people with disabilities and older adults. And then, yeah, so they had a paid driver. So they didn't have to worry about recruiting volunteers. It was automatic. Most people that wanted rides could get rides if they scheduled them in advance. And with volunteer drivers, of course, definitely the COVID and the price of gas is precluding the recruitment of volunteers. And the further out you are, like in West County, the harder it is to get volunteers because of the distance that they have to go to the urban areas.
So is it just the West County, or is it more than that?
Well, West County is losing our contract. Vintage House that's in Sonoma, they are going to be losing funding. And then Healdsburg Senior Center that operates Dash, they could, as long as the economy stays decent, that program is somewhat subsidized by occupancy tax. The city leased the vehicles, and the city pays the mobility or the senior center staff to schedule those rides. But they depend on volunteers to drive the city leased vehicles. So we subsidize the background checks, fingerprinting, all the costs that are associated with volunteers.
And are these all individuals that are outside? All these individuals getting rides, are these all individuals that are outside the paratransit area, or are they sometimes some of them in, some of them are out? It was more depending on the individual's preference.
I think it's all across the board. Some are in the service area and some are outside of the service area.
And these are free rides for the user?
Yes.
Okay.
And so we don't know, as this system ends, what kind of planning picks up the ball here? Who do we look to fill this gap and so I hear that we should come here and we'll plan to do that. But that my larger question will continue to be, who do we ask to make a plan?
I think transit agencies can work. I believe these agencies can work together to create a great thing, but it goes back to the funding component. That's where I keep kind of going in, where it would be the tricky part, the same reasons these programs are having trouble, right?
Right.
And so that might be where, partnerships might need to take place or help with that aspect. I think that we can get really creative, and there are some solutions out there. but right now, as we function, that out of 3/4 mile would be a tricky push. But it doesn't mean it's, you know, there, as you said, there's agencies that do different things. So I appreciate hearing this, and, you know, and I am aware of some of the issues that you're speaking about too, for sure.
Dana, I feel like there must be some sort of diagram of how funding gets sorted and how, you know, how it comes from like the federal level, state level, and then how it gets distributed. Is there some sort of like graphic that can be shared with the public? Because I don't think Tracy's question is out of the norm. I think a lot of people have that same question. I mean, I know that our board always asks like, well, where's this money coming from? Where are all these acronyms? Like, what does this mean? And sometimes it is very confusing because there's always grants coming up. There's always stipulations on how that money can actually be spent. So when agencies get money, they can't always spend it for services. They have to spend it in certain areas and only certain areas. So I think that it would be helpful to have kind of like a graphic that shows like these agencies are in charge of this, you know, because even we don't get money directly. It all gets funneled through different sources. So I don't know, Dana, if you have something like that could be shared.
You know, we have some graphs of how the transit agencies receive funding, or the funding that the different types of funding that the transit agencies receive in their budgets, and all of them combined. So that could be useful. I could look around and see what else we have, you know, in terms of just general transportation funding and where it comes from and gets funneled through. Maybe that's a good topic for a future meeting, is to just have a funding, a little bit of a funding workshop and education session. So I'll bring that up to my team and see what we could put together. I think that that's a good idea.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then in terms of, you know, planning for programs in the future, I think that really understanding the needs is important, and I appreciate you bringing up these concerns. That's a place to start.
Another thing that would be really interesting to learn is models from other communities that are working well, that we kind of need to know what we're asking for, so that when money becomes available, that we're ready to pounce on it. And I don't know what those ideal programs would be that other communities have.
Well, I mean, I think from the idealist perspective, I think there's, you know, the Blue Ribbon Task Force did a lot of work over the pandemic to kind of determine what they think is, you know, what Bay Area wide they consider best practices. And there's a number of things that came out of that related to paratransit. And I think I mentioned it earlier that there'll be some funding streams to do some pilots. I think Drennan's leading that effort from MTC, and and I know really what they're looking for is coordination. And so I think, you know, having these discussions here and figuring out, you know, what makes sense is, I think, definitely part of the process. I think, you know, and I look at these locations, I hate to put this on Maria, but I mean, they're all county locations. So, I mean, you know, short of us doing further integration, you know, that I think that the service areas fall within the county's purview, for better or worse. But I mean, I think we're all, I mean, I think, you know, once the county's kind of limited on, you know, their resources they can provide to paratransit clients, it pulls on our paratransit resources as well. But I mean, I think that, you know, even going as far as to, you know, if you're worried about individual clients, it's like which ones are in the paratransit areas and which ones aren't, and how far are they outside of the paratransit. And it's interesting once you get into that level of detail, I don't know the problem, but it may be smaller than you think, or maybe bigger than you think, you know, so getting into that like actual geographic data may be you know, a good way, a healthy way to hand it off if that's how it's ending. But yeah, I think that kind of that the work that's, you know, I think there's definitely, I mean, all these things we talked about, like scheduling platforms, TNCs, you know, better integration. This is all stuff that there's going to be some funding for later on this fall.
Thank you, Yuri. I think that's you know, one thing we could probably look at as well is how some other areas have partnered with TNCs to provide services. You know, I think our county is particularly challenged because we are such a large county with so much rural area and such a large population living outside of the more concentrated cities. And that provides a very large challenge for transit and even for maintaining roads. I mean, it's just that we have more road miles per capita than any other county, at least in the Bay Area, and probably more, you know, if you look at the state, it's probably pretty skewed as well. So it is very challenging. But I think that we can definitely look around and, you know, there should, given that even though we do have some particular challenges, that we can certainly look at some models that other communities have used.
On the Coordinated Plan Committee, and there's a gentleman, I don't know if you know, from Contra Costa, John Cunningham. He's a transit planner, but he was on the task force, the transportation task force for the Master Plan of Aging, which is a CDA program. And they came up with a number of recommendations for paratransit and older adult transportation for California. It would be wonderful to maybe have some speakers or invite some of the other counties to come talk about some of their programs. I know that Santa Cruz also has a wonderful paratransit. I think it's an on-demand program that they funded through their Measure M, like county tax. So anyway, it might be helpful to have some people come and talk about their programs.
Yep, we can look into that and maybe generate some ideas through the regional Paratransit Coordinating Council workshop that's coming up. So thank you. All right, does anybody have anything else to add? All right, certainly a lot to think about for future meetings. If you think of any topics for the next meeting, please feel free to reach out to me. And our next meeting is scheduled July 19th.
So Dana, for the topics for the next meetings, I mean, there was a number of them that were suggested here. Are you able to work just directly with those individuals that made those suggestions and just kind of pinpoint?
Yeah, I think we have a funding workshop, hearing from other areas, cities or counties on programs, just looking at different models. So those are maybe two separate topic areas that we could look into.
And I would even suggest maybe, I mean, if we're just curious of like what other good ideas are out there, then we can just do like Kathleen was suggesting. But if we're interested in like solving a particular problem that's unique to our county due to the loss of this funding, I think it would be useful for us to have a further conversation and find out what are some, you know, solutions that might actually fit that. Because for like example, TNC is not going to help, might not help. I know like Healdsburg, at least I don't know if this is true, but I've always heard that like you're not going to get a TNC in Healdsburg or West County for that matter. That's not going to solve those problems. It's going to be something else that solves that. I mean, you get a TNC in Santa Rosa, but that's not where the current problem is. So I just think that to just try to identify, like, are there things that we can discuss further, or are there things that we need to, are there things we can get presentations on right away? The funding, that makes sense, but some of the other areas, if we really want to try to solve solutions, we might need to talk further about what are the right size solutions to a particular problem.
Maybe we could have the people that are trying to work on solutions in Cloverdale come to the next meeting and talk about what they're working on. I know they have city council members that are pushing on some stuff.
I think that would be great. And I know that they did put in a 5310 application, or the senior center did, and it'd be interesting to hear from those folks.
They didn't end up doing that.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I mean, yeah, I think that would be great to hear from Cloverdale. We can certainly invite them to this meeting.
Nice.
So would that be an interesting, good place to start? Does anyone feel, or that, bringing in Cloverdale, the various people who are interested in this topic and working on a solution in Cloverdale?
I think it would be really great to hear from, so, we don't try to solve a problem that doesn't exist, right? Like, really focus on the problem that is, and it sounds like they've already done some work and some thought process, and that would help us.
Mm-hmm. And then, it's possible that some things that they're working on may be applicable to other areas as well. Okay, great.
And Kathleen, you mentioned that report. I'd be interested in, like, looking at, what some of those, if we could maybe bring that report to the meeting and look at the recommendations and see if there are ones that would work for us here, or, if there's some, if maybe some of them we're already doing, and it's just a matter of us communicating that.
See if I can get that. Was a task force that the state, from people all around the state, that made paratransit recommendations. Yeah, there is also, I forgot to mention, the American Council of the Blind has a paratransit equity document that they've been circulating, and they have also made recommendations for enhancements to paratransit that I can get you that document.
All right, well, I suggest that we start with inviting the folks in Cloverdale, and then maybe come up with a list of topics that we would like to review with this committee and discuss, and kind of schedule it out for our future meetings. So, if we're successful in bringing in the folks in Cloverdale at our next meeting, then we'll move forward with that, and then can review a list of topics. If we're not able to, for some reason, at our next meeting, then we can move up at one of the topics that we've discussed. Does that sound like a good plan? Okay, great. All right, well then, if there's not anything else, then we will see you on July 19th. Thank you.